Okay, today's Chaf Beis Shvat. It's the 24th yahrzeit of the Rebbitzen. I spent my entire life in Crown Heights, minus a few years. I never saw the woman. Never in my life did I see the Rebbitzen. I had a friend who was from a certain mishpacha that had access, that would see the Rebbitzen all the time and talk to her on the phone and so forth. But for most of us, the Rebbitzen was known about, never seen, and for that matter, very little talked about. The Rebbitzen became a Rebbitzen after she passed away. For most Lubavitcher Hasidim, women as well as men, we didn't know who she was. We knew she was there. And to be very direct, we learned more after she passed away than before she passed away, just how important she was to us and to the Rebbe. But she chose to be completely out of the limelight. Completely out of the limelight. She was completely unknown. She was unseen. She wanted no part of a public role. The Rebbitzen used to say, "My husband is a Rebbe, does not make me a Rebbitzen." And then the Rebbitzen passed away. When the Rebbitzen passed away, for the first time, the Rebbe opened his home. The Rebbe's house was off limits to Lubavitcher Hasidim. And the Rebbe made a minyan in his house. His first floor, his dining room, and his living area became a shul. And the Rebbe davened there, of course, pretty much every day during the year of Avelis for the Rebbitzen. And after that also, the Rebbe spent considerable periods of portion at home. And of course, over the next few years, the Rebbe spent less and less time at home and more time in 770. Now, of course, for the Rebbe to live in 770 meant literally living in his office. Literally, the Rebbe was 24 hours a day in the same room. That's where his bed was, that's where his desk was, that's where he worked, day and night. If you think about the fact that for about 3 or 4 years, the Rebbe's entire world was a tiny little room surrounded by books, it really, really makes you feel quite a bit uneasy. One of the things that occurred after the Rebbe passed away was the publishing of her picture, of her photo. The Rebbitzen was a private person. The Rebbitzen didn't have a million pictures. The Rebbitzen probably had 6 or 7 pictures of herself, which she kept. They were very private. They were her business. Some of them are from the day of her wedding. There were very few pictures of the Rebbitzen that she herself kept. And they were printed in the Algemeine, in a newspaper. I was a bochad of 21, 22. I was a big boy, and I knew it all. I've gotten very dumb since then, but in those days I knew everything. And I remember the fury. I remember how angry we were that the Algemeine dared print, I think, 3 pictures of the Rebbitzen. Here was a woman who spent her entire life hiding, and then she passes away, and within days, she passed away on Tuesday night to Wednesday. I think that Shabbos, the Algemeine already had photographs of the Rebbitzen. But on Sunday, when the Rebbe Jacobson, the editor of the Algemeine Journal, walked by the Rebbe, by dollars, the Rebbe said, "Thank you for the pictures." Now, read into this what you wish. Thank you for the pictures. For some people, that was, okay, we were wrong. The Rebbe wanted the pictures printed, and there were many people who owed him apologies, because many people very, very insensitively told Rebbe what they thought of the fact that he published the Rebbe's pictures, only to have the Rebbe say, "Thank you for the printing of the pictures." Here's a piece of paper, which unfortunately most of you don't yet have. Again, assuming at the speed that the copies will show up, which is most interesting. For Shloishim, this is even before Shloishim, within weeks of the Rebbitzen passing away, Merkez published a pamphlet called Imenu HaMalka. I want you to know what the word Merkez means. Merkez, today in Lubavitch everybody's printing, whatever they want. Merkez giving out a sefer de facto means the Rebbe gave out a sefer. Even though Merkez didn't always have the Rebbe's signature on every sefer, the Rebbe took a charayis in Merkez. And when Merkez made a mistake, it reflected on the Rebbe personally, and the Rebbe was very particular about it. Merkez published a little booklet called Imenu HaMalka about the Rebbitzen. Within weeks of her passing, in that book there were several photos, apparently including some colored pictures, or pictures with some color. There were only pictures of the Rebbitzen with color. So, Gavriel Zinner wrote the Rebbe a letter. Gavriel Zinner is a Hungarian, a puppet chassid, who was one of the biggest B'kiyim alive today. He's still alive, lives in Borough Park. He has an incredible memory. He knows voluminous amounts. He was very, very close to the Papa Rav. He was apparently a big Rebbe in Williamsburg, the Papa Rav, who upon him was a very big God. He was a very big Talmid Chacham. And he was very close to the Papa Rebbe. When the Papa Rebbe passed away, he became close to our Rebbe, Gavil Zinner. And it's a very interesting thing that he joined Lubavitch at the end of the road, so to speak, in the MEMS in the 80s. And he used to ask the Rebbe questions. He's a Rav. He wrote Svarim on Halacha. Neta Gavril, you see in your house, Neta Gavril, those are his Svarim. And he used to ask the Rebbe questions, and the Rebbe used to answer him. During a period of time that the Rebbe really was no longer answering such questions, when he would ask, he would get answers. So here you have to understand, this is a clash of worlds. He's a Hungarian Jew, where of course the most important thing in the world is tznius. Joining a Lubavitcher Hasidus, only to discover that the Lubavitcher Rebbe printed in a book photographs of his wife. It seemed to him very, very inappropriate, and he wrote the Rebbe a letter. And what you have on the top half of this page is a letter that he wrote to the Rebbe, objecting to the fact that Lubavitch printed pictures of the Rebbitzen. And the Rebbe did a classic Rebbe job. You can see the page. You see his type of 6 lines, and then the Rebbe's notes written on the page. What the Rebbe does here with his notes is he crosses out certain words that he wrote, writes in other words, moves some of his words from place to place, so that the end result is that the Rebbe rewrites his own letter and draws the exact opposite conclusion, which is that instead of the pictures not being printed, the pictures, in fact, should be printed. This is a most interesting piece of paper. Most interesting piece of paper. Because he writes a letter quoting sources that there is an issue of tznius, even for a woman that you don't know, and even if a woman has already passed away. And the Rebbe takes his words, modifies them a little bit, and comes to the exact opposite conclusion. And the conclusion is that it is perfectly halakhically permitted to print the pictures of the Rebbitzen. And he finishes, I'm just going to show you the last line. I mean, you can see the Rebbe's handwriting here, but unfortunately by Memches, you can see the Rebbe's handwriting trembled very much. Look at the bottom of the page. If her picture is not published, it will lessen the effect of achayit and alibi. People learning, the living should take to heart. And Tafshir Memches, when the Rebbitzen passed away, the theme of the entire year was v'achayit and alibi. The living should take to heart. In other words, to learn a lesson from the Rebbitzen who had now passed away. Kenira b'muchash, as we see in fact, and then the Rebbe says in parenthesis, perhaps this is the reason why some people are seeing to it to print more and more of her pictures. I don't want to spend an hour talking about this. I want to spend 5 minutes talking about this. What I want to say to you in simple words is, I am a Lubavitcher. My earliest memories are 40 years old. I've been around Lubavitch. I mean, believe me, I'm now a big chassid, and I haven't been around since the first day, but around a long time. The Rebbitzen became a Rebbitzen to us after she passed away. And the Rebbe made her so. The Rebbitzen wanted no part of leadership. She wanted no part of public. The Rebbe pushed her on us. It wasn't just that Hasidim decided to bring the Rebbitzen into our home and to put her pictures on the walls. The Rebbe did this on purpose. The Rebbe talked about her. The Rebbe told stories about her. The Rebbe wanted the Rebbitzen to be in our lives. Perhaps the way you would explain it is the Rebbitzen didn't want this role because of her own concerns, but those concerns were unfortunately now gone, and the Rebbe made the Rebbitzen into a Rebbitzen. Most of us have pictures of the Rebbitzen in their homes. I think that this is with the Rebbe's approval. There's a little bit of a controversy about it. The Rebbitzen was apparently a woman. I mean, the Rebbe said to somebody during the Shiva, a politician, told the Rebbe, I heard she was a great woman. So the Rebbe says to him, more than people imagine. And then the Rebbe adds a few more words. Her true greatness was known only to God. Now you could say that the Rebbe said it because he loved his wife and he was saying nice things about her, he was sitting shiva. But if you understand that I didn't say it, the Rebbe said it. The Rebbe says about the Rebbitzen, her true greatness is known only to God. Which means to say that Rebbitzen was a secret from the Rebbe. The Rebbe didn't know who she was. In other words, this was a tzaddikis who managed to live a life of complete privacy. She did her things, and we know nothing about her. But it is in our best interest to have a connection to her, because it'll make us better Jews, which is the bottom line. One of the little things we know about the Rebbitzen, we know very little about her, is that when the Rebbitzen would ben shlicht, she would make sure nobody was in the room with her. I mean, the story was that the Rebbitzen told people she had leichted from the Rebbitzen Chayamushka, her namesake, from the Tzemach Tzedek's Rebbitzen. And she never used those leichter. And she said, these leichter belong to a big Rebbitzen, and I am a simple woman. How do I, a simple woman, use the leichter of a big Rebbitzen? She says, but I put them on the table, when ich gucke auf sie, when ich feel zugebunden to the mishpacha. I put them on the table when she benches. Look what she said. I look at the candles, and she lit her own little candlesticks, and I feel connected to the family. But the Rebbitzen made a point when she benched licht, nobody else should be in the room. This is just a small example of the nature of her privacy. Now, what I am handing you today is a most interesting stack of papers. And let me just assure you that for every paper that you have here, there are 10 more. I have a book. This book was published about a year and a half ago, an erech. It is a very compelling sefer. It is a book of Igros Kodesh, of correspondence, of letters from the Frierdike Rebbe to the Rebbe and the Rebbitzen. The entire volume, the entire sefer, is several hundred letters that the Frierdike Rebbe wrote the Rebbe and the Rebbitzen. The Frierdike Rebbe and the Rebbe and the Rebbitzen were separated for many, many years. The Rebbe was in Latvia and Poland. Our Rebbe was in Germany and France. And there were hundreds of letters that went back and forth. A lot of these letters have to do with Sfarim. A lot of these letters had to do with banking, with finance, with money. The Rebbe was handling the Frierdike Rebbe's accounts, because the Frierdike Rebbe couldn't keep his money in Poland, the money was kept in Paris. Most of those letters are not here. In other words, this volume, if it would be every single letter the Frierdike Rebbe wrote to Rebbe and the Rebbitzen, would be literally twice as thick as it is. This is an unbelievably revealing sefer. It's an incredible sefer. It's Igros Kodesh and Frierdike Rebbe Chelik Tesvav. Okay? It came out Yud Tammuz Tafshanan a year and a half ago. It's an incredible sefer. And you see the most private side of the Frierdike Rebbe. You see the Frierdike Rebbe not as a Rebbe, but as a father. You see the Rebbe and the Rebbitzen juggling with such sensitivity the fact that the Frierdike Rebbe is their father and the Frierdike Rebbe is their Rebbe. The Rebbe tightrope walks in his relation to the Frierdike Rebbe. On the one hand, the Rebbe is riding like a son to a father, but at the same time he's riding like a chassid to a Rebbe. And even the Rebbitzen, you see that care, that concern. There's very, very little of the Rebbe's correspondence. 99% of this sefer, or 98% of the sefer, is the Frierdike Rebbe's writings to the Rebbe. There were short little notes that the Rebbe must have kept copies of letters that he actually sent, where you see the Rebbe's answering the Frierdike Rebbe. And if it was in Aleph Nissen, I would just cull out of this sefer all of those little pieces of paper, and you would get a window into our Rebbe's world in the most private domain. Our Rebbe is corresponding with his Rebbe, with the Frierdike Rebbe. It's very, very, very special. But today is not yet Aleph Nissen. Today is Chav Beis Shvat. And consequently, the stack of letters you have in front of you is about the Rebbitzen. What I am going to do is go in order. We're going to start, and the pages are numbered by column. Okay, it makes life a bit easier. So instead of simply numbering it by the page, it's numbered by columns, so that it's a little bit easier to keep track. But you're going to have to navigate with me. If you want copies, they're here. So I'm beginning on page 2. This is a letter from the summer of Tav Reish Pei Gimel, 1923. The Rebbe was 22. The Rebbitzen was 23, and there was talk of a shidduch. The Rebbe had come to see the Rebbitzen in Shvat of that year, 6 months before, and this was his second visit. The Rebbe again came to meet the Rebbitzen and the Frierdike Rebbe as a chassan. There was a discussion of a shidduch, and here is a paragraph from the Frierdike Rebbe to the Rebbitzen about her chassan to be about our Rebbe. Mein Tochter, my daughter, die Woche habe ich energisch gelernt Hilchas Mendel. This week I energetically learned Hilchas Mendel. Must I translate? Okay. Sheyichya. Kamat jeden Tag, almost every day, bis nechten Abend until last night, einige Shoys in Tag, for a number of hours each day. Sonntag, on Sunday, habe mir selber dritt verbracht dem ganzen Tag. On Sunday, the three of us meant the Frierdike Rebbe, the Rebbe, and the Rashag, who was already married to Chana, the older daughter of the Frierdike Rebbe, spent the entire day together. Zeh Priyatne, very interesting. As geblieben Shabbos dort, he was here for Shabbos. Min astam wird Sonntag mit Hashem vorn aheim mit Glick. And probably Sunday he's going to leave. Fühlt sich gar anders, he's feeling and behaving quite differently, wie dem ersten Mal, was es hier gewesen, than the first time that he was here. Es ist geblieben sehr a gute Priater Upsataliene von Kafkaz. I don't know what that word means, but the Rebbe says he's much more comfortable now than he was here last time, and it's all left a very good impression from the Caucasus. They were on vacation in the Caucasus. Wollte werden noch einmal gehen auf den Berg spazieren. He, meaning the Rebbe, if he had the time, would again want to walk up the Caucasus Mountains. Mehr dem Spazier Bisenberg, and he's not so interested in climbing the mountains as he is in walking towards the mountain. Ich kann sagen, says the Frierdike Rebbe to the Rebbitzen about the Rebbe, I can say, as ich kann Shem a bissel. I know him a little bit, I've gotten to know him. Ist geblieben sehr zufrieden von der Priyam und Aufnahme. He was very happy from the Priyam and Aufnahme, from the ambiance, from the environment, and the way he was greeted. Hat azafir nicht gesehen. He's never seen such a kind of behavior. Sehr heimische und freundliche. That the way he was embraced was very heimish and very friendly. Was as gid sehr asach, that gives an awful lot. The Frierdike Rebbe is indicating that in that little world, that inner world, there was a certain warmth and a certain embracing aspect that was very, very special, that was a little bit foreign to the Rebbe. So this is a Frierdike Rebbe right now. You have to understand. You must remember this is the Frierdike Rebbe. He sounds like a loving, doting father. That's what he sounds like. And as you read this volume, you get this impression more and more distinctly. You forget that it's the Frierdike Rebbe. Every once in a while, there's a line that says, it's the Rebbe. But that's how personal this is.
Where was the Rebbitzen?
She was in a stuff. This was on vacation in the Kafkaz. And I don't know the details. I'm sorry, but I don't know the details. Now, the next page, page 3, is another side of the Rebbitzen. And here you're seeing how the Frierdike Rebbe valued the Rebbitzen. The Frierdike Rebbe, I don't have to tell you, had more than his share of tzaras in his life. And of course, one of the tzaras which Frierdike Rebbe suffered was that the Russian government meddled in his business, and they did not allow him, I think, to receive correspondence directly from overseas, from out of the country, which meant that he was unable to handle his own financial affairs, his money. So here is a letter from the Frierdike Rebbe written in Russian, and I think it's a legal document, where the Frierdike Rebbe writes a legal document announcing that since he is not able to handle his own money, his own financial situation, he is giving what they call in English a power of attorney to his daughter. The Frierdike Rebbe had a mother, the Frierdike Rebbe had a wife, the Frierdike Rebbe had a son-in-law, and the Frierdike Rebbe certainly had a lot of Hasidim who would have been very trustworthy, who knew a thing or two about money. The Frierdike Rebbe chose to give the responsibility for his finances to his daughter, which means that she had two properties in very, very special quantities. A, good skills, management business skills, and B, more importantly, the ability to keep her mouth closed. Secrecy. Let's read this. Ani meyapa es koicha, I am empowering Shala Ezrachis, the citizen Chaya Muthya Bat Yosef Nersen, that's the Rebbitzen, Shegara Leningrad, that lives in Leningrad, Rechev Machabaya 2212, Dita 10, apartment 10, Shetucha Lekabel, that she is empowered to accept Kol Minik Sofin, all kinds of monies, Me'abanka Mamshalti from the National Bank, Koil Snifim V'Machlaka Shalei, including other branches, V'chein Irgune Ashroim Memshaltim Bezrachim Acherim, which are other organizations that are governmental and civil of other sorts. V'chein Me'anoshim V'Irgunim Pratim. She can also manage my monies which are coming in from individuals and from other organizations. V'chein, as well as Misnifa de Telegraph, in other words, money that's being sent in from overseas, which I think was really the most important issue. Kol Hiskasvas B'nei Seiksafim. All correspondence about money. Bituach, that means security. Divrei Deyar, anything that comes through the mail of Yekari Erech, of great value. Upshutam, and even simple matters. V'chein Ha'avoris Kaspiyes, the transferring of monies from person to person, from account to account. Shemagiyas Al-Shmid, that are reaching me. The Rebbe says, again, the government of Russia had not allowed the Frierdike Rebbe to receive correspondence, so he empowered his daughter. Ba'asha Azois, with this power of attorney, Ani meyapes koyachem, I am empowering you. Loses yipui koyach mala, you have the authority to transmit the power of attorney I gave you, either completely, or chelki, or in part, la'anoshim acherim. He says to the Rebbe, to the Rebbitzen, this is a legal document. I'm empowering you, and you are empowered to even empower others to handle the Rebbe's accounts. This again it's a window into. We don't know how smart the Rebbitzen was. We don't know how capable she was because we know nothing about her. But she was evidently incredibly capable and incredibly smart. To do what the Rebbe is asking her to do was very responsible, very, very serious, and very, very dangerous. And he trusted her. You know, the story, of course, is well known that when the Frierdike was arrested, and he went off to Kastrama, he went off to 3 years of exile, who did he take with him? He took 2 Hasidim, and then Rebbitzen. The Frierdike had a wife. The Frierdike had many Hasidim who had been very happy to be his shamash. He took the Rebbitzen. He took the Rebbitzen because he trusted her, and because he was comfortable with her. Because the Rebbitzen was very good at keeping secrets. As you'll see later on in the stack, the Frierdike would one day complain that she keeps secrets a little too well. You'll see later on. Page 5. This is just a shtickle hot. This is just pure love. The Rebbe and the Rebbitzen were engaged forever. Many years. I don't know how many. 3, 4, 5. Their wedding didn't take place until Kislev Peites, till the very end of 1928. The letter we read before was 1923. Between 1923 and 1928 is 5 years. So we engaged for a very long time. But there was never a vort. There was never a vort. 1 week before their marriage, they got married Yudal Kislev, Vav Kislev, which was also a Tuesday, they made an official tnoim, a vort. And the Rebbitzen was not even there. Because the wedding, remember, took place in Varsha, which is in Poland. The Frierdike Rebbe was living in Riga, which is in Latvia. The Rebbitzen and her mother and her sister had gone on to Poland in anticipation of the wedding for shopping, to buy clothing and other things. The Frierdike Rebbe and the Chassan, our Rebbe, stayed behind in Riga till after Shabbos. The Ufruf of the Rebbe was not in Poland, it was in Riga. So he's writing a letter to his daughter. Mazel tov dir, mein teire Tochter. Mazel tov to you, my precious daughter, Mazel tov. This is a letter about her name, her vort, and she wasn't even present. Nechten Abend, last night, haben mir gemacht Noim, we made at Noim the conditions of the Chasane, b'shal tevu u'mitzlachas. Given nor einige etliche Menschen, and it was very, very small and informal. And now the Frierdike Rebbe gives a bracha to his daughter. Der Eibisch der Baruch Hu soll helfen, God Almighty shall help. As soll sein mit Glück, that your upcoming wedding should be with good fortune, in alle Insichten, in all aspects, begashmius und beruchnius. Und die Chasane soll sein, the wedding, which was destined to be exactly 1 week later, should take place. B'yem hamugdul, on the appropriate day, b'shal tevu mitzlachas, in a good and successful hour. Mit a fulle Glick und Nachas, with full good fortune and Nachas, in alle Protein, in every detail. Glick überall, good fortune everywhere. Now top of the next page. Und der Eberste Baruch Hu soll dir helfen. Listen to these words. And God Almighty should help you und geben and give you a reinem, klaren, lichtigen Verstand. A pure, clear, illuminated comprehension. Oi verstehen dem reinem, scheinem Emes. To understand the clear and beautiful truth. Leit dem Wellen, according to desires, von unser greise, heilige Sedes, of our great and holy ancestors, Zecher Tzadikim Lebrach. As ihr sollt solche sein, that you should merit, by understanding who you are, so to speak, as ihre Brachas, that their blessings, sollen euch umkommen, should reach you, mit viel Glück, with much success. Amen, amen, amen. Wir haben euch geschickt Telegrammen, we sent you telegrams. Wie es weiß, Deutsch ist der Adress nicht richtig, and apparently they hadn't gotten the telegram. This is the age of letters. I mean, nobody writes like this anymore. You send an email or a text, you understand. But in this case, this is how things were done. But this is a father writing to a daughter. I mean, there are a few words here that are a Rebbe, but for the most part, it sounds like a father writing to a daughter. Okay, now. Okay, there's something missing here, and it's my fault, and I apologize. But this is a letter, 6b, as you see it here. 6b is a letter from the Frierdike Rebbe to the Rebbitzen on the Shana Rabbah. This is such a wonderful letter. The Frierdike was in America, Tafish Tzadik, 1929-1930. And the Rebbe and the Rebbitzen were in Europe. Shendel, as the Frierdike Rebbe called the younger sister, Shendel, and the Alta Rebbe, the Chamadina, and the Rebbe's mother were all in Europe. The Rebbe traveled alone with the Rashag. And he wrote letters to his children. This is a letter which he wrote on Shana Rabbah to the Rebbitzen. And I apologize that you're missing the first word, because the first words are really, really wonderful. But it says it's a Shana Rabbah. And there's a custom by Yidden on the Shana Rabbah. Look at the top of page 6b. Minig. As der Vater schmeißt up the Kinder sheyichim mit der Rishaina. People don't know that this is a custom, but a lot of Yidden do it. And Lubavitch is not known, but apparently the Rebbeim did it. You do Hishainas in Shul, yeah? You come up from Shul with the Hishainas, and you clap Hishainas on the children. Maybe against Ayin Hora. Git sein Bracha, you hit your children with a Hishaina, and you give a blessing. As die Kinder Yichya, that the children Yichya sollen nicht wissen von kein Schmitz, a ganzen Jahr, should know of no lashes all year. Und haben Glück and have success and noch nicht in the Gashmis. So the Rebbe continues now. Bei mir is erst noch ein Dat, because I just finished davening Shachris. Hab ich bei sich im Zimmer, so I in my own room, getonat azay, did this, azay wie ihr kinderlach Yichlu wollten stehen neben mir, as if you're actually in the room with me. Und ich schich euch teire unsere Kinder, I'm sending to you my precious children. Adam, son-in-law, und Enekel, grandson Yichlu. Mein tiefsten Bruch, my deepest blessing. As the Eberste Baruch Hu soll euch beglücken, that God Almighty should give you success in alts, begashmis, beruchnis, so forth. He says, I came into my room, and I took my Hashina, and I made believe you were in the room, and I gave you klep. And I gave you a bracha, you shouldn't suffer a whole year. Most interesting. Now there's another letter, which is on page 6d, if I can have you fast forward for a moment, which is also written when the Rebbe was away from the Rebbitzen. And it's identical. The Rebbe sent two different telegrams, one to the Frierdike, to the Rebbe, to our Rebbe, and the other to the Rebbitzen. So you can read either one, but let's read the Rebbitzen's one. Okay, Biti hayakara maras chayimush tichya. The bottom of page 6d. Ich gib dir lekach. I am giving you lekach. Und der Eberste Baruch Hu soll geben dir, mit ein Manche Yichya, God Almighty should give you, And your son Sheyechya Azisen Glücklich and Yar, a sweet, successful year in Gashmis and in Ruchnias. This is the Baal Shem Tov's Nusach of Lekach was Ich gebe the Lekach, und Ebesh soll geben Azisen Yar. So the Frierdike Rebbe was sending them Lekach. They were someplace else, and he used this lashon. I want you to know that, as far as the question of children, which is of course in all of your minds, when the Rebbitzen and the Rebbe first got married, the first few years, there's many, many brachas about children. Within 3 or 4 years, the Frierdike Rebbe is fewer. I mean, it still comes up from time to time, but the idea, mamish, in the early years, every single bracha, every single letter, there's such heartzige brachas, Ebesh shall geben a guten Zun, and so on. It stops, and then you just have them infrequently, unfortunately. This is, of course, the greatest pain, the unspoken pain that the Rebbitzen never had children. Now, something most compelling. Talk about privacy. 6c. This is not to the Rebbitzen. This is to the Rebbe. Okay, the Rebbitzen had a younger sister her name was Shena, but in the house she was called Shendel. That was her nickname. Okay, so if you're a purist, if you're a Lubavitcher purist, Shena is Shendel. And the Rebbe, our Rebbe, had proposed a chassan for Shendel. The Rebbe, our Rebbe, wrote a letter, the Frierdike Rebbe, a letter suggesting a possible shidduch for Shendel. And the Frierdike Rebbe answers, Mehari, and I don't know who Aleph Yud is, and I don't want to know who it is. This was the Rebbe's proposal, I don't like the proposal. Which means there's more water than wine. Es is site. What that means? He's diluted. He's not solid enough. Mekavim, we hope. Ki yavei avrech bocher teiv will get a good young man. Shemahalal l'meisi the lamden godel, who is praised as a big lamden. Gam yireh shamayim. Okay. She married her cousin. What don't you get? What's there to get? The Rebbe had suggested a chassan to the Frierdike Rebbe. The Frierdike Rebbe objects to it. He says he's not solid enough. And he describes what he wants for his daughter. Kof, kof. Yeah? Mahal l'moisei l'lamden godel, gam yireh shamayim. Not that he drives a Lexus. Okay. At your own risk.
Yeah. Does that mean that Shendel and Shena are the same name?
Yeah.
Or, like you can't have Shena and Shena in the same family?
Oh, do me a favor. Don't start with the religion. Ask a rabbi. Now, page 6e. 6e is very interesting. It is so interesting. This is a lesson in parenting. It's such an interesting little letter. The Rebbe and the Rebbitzen moved. Okay? Page 6e. The pages are numbered by columns. The Rebbe and the Rebbitzen moved from Berlin to Paris. Right? When the Nazis came to power, what was it, January 1933? The Rebbe and the Rebbitzen moved from Berlin to Paris. The move was very complicated because the Rebbe and the Rebbitzen were citizens of no country. The Rebbe and the Rebbitzen didn't have any... They were students. That's why one of the reasons they had to be in school, they wouldn't have allowed them to stay in Germany. They wouldn't let them stay in France. In the last few years before the war, beginning with, say, 36, 37, the Rebbe was not able to go to the Frierdike Rebbe for Yom Tov. You know why? They wouldn't let him back into France. Can you imagine? You know how far France is from Poland? It's not far at all. The Rebbe could not be with the Frierdike Rebbe for Yom Tov because he was not neutralized as a French citizen or as rights of permanent residence. He was there as a student. And when the Rebbe and the Rebbitzen moved from Berlin to France, for whatever reason, their belongings were shipped not directly from Berlin to France, but from Berlin to Latvia, to Riga, and from Riga to France. And what happened was the Rebbe and the Rebbitzen went on to France without their belongings, and their things were sent on by the Rebbitzen's sister, Chana Gurari. So here is a letter from the Frierdike Rebbe writing to the Rebbitzen about her sister, the older daughter of the Frierdike Rebbe. Yesterday I wrote you all letters, and I'm sure you'll get them. At the moment, the Frierdike Rebbe writes, I am experiencing delight and satisfaction. From the good and sweet midas of your sister, V'gisaschem and your brother, sister-in-law, Biteinu hayakora morav tichi. The Frierdike Rebbe is describing to the Rebbe and the Rebbitzen how much Chana loves them. And he writes, B'roisi, as I watched, Goydel ha'ava pnimis, the great inner love, V'teya levava, and her pure heart, Lach Yeseha, to her sisters, B'nei Seinu hayakodes tichya, our daughters, U'legiseseha, and to her brothers-in-law, Hanechbodim, the honored ones, Yichya. The Rebbe was living in Paris with the Rebbitzen, and so was Mendel, Horenstein, and Schendel. The Rebbitzen sister Schendel married, in effect, a first cousin. Mendel Horenstein, who was a Kohen, was the Frierdike Rebbe's first cousin. Mendel Horenstein's mother was the Rebbe Rashab's sister. So in other words, the Rebbitzen Schendel married a first cousin once removed. And they were living in Paris. The Rebbe and the Rebbitzen were living in Paris. And there's many letters from the Frierdike Rebbe to our Rebbe asking him to be Makarev Mendel Horenstein. And apparently the Rebbe and Mendel Horenstein got along wonderfully. They were good friends. By the time the war started, Mendel Horenstein had a full beard. In other words, he'd become more of what a Hasidic person should be. The Rebbe was incredibly involved. The Rebbe spent a lot of time and effort on the Rebbitzen's brother-in-law and the Rebbitzen's sister. So the four of them are living in Paris. Chana Garari is living together with the Rebbe, the Frierdike Rebbe, in Riga. And she packed up their stuff and sent it off to Paris. So the Rebbe, the Frierdike Rebbe, is describing the joy and the love with which she did it. She's always diligent in this sincere love. And I'm reading on, the fifth line. How hard did she work? Until she was able to collect all of the belongings. And how happy did it make her to bring him home to our home. And the Frierdike Rebbe says, such a pure heart deserves to be praised. And you, my precious daughters. And this is written to the Rebbitzen and to Schendel. The Frierdike Rebbe says, you have, thank God, from her to learn good midas. And that's in fact what we're all about. That each person shows Allah should learn from the good traits of their fellow. And even you, my precious sons-in-law, even though you're strong men, supersede, predominate the ruchnius over the gashmius, and you will find good. Velikim, and God Almighty, Elokei Avesenu, the God of our fathers, Yihi Bezreinu, will be in our help, Ube'ezrechem, and in your help, Ube'azora, and to give you the help, Lihiyayis Giboyre Koyach, to be men of strength, Misnagim Bedarki Atayra Mitzvah, behaving according to the ways of Torah and mitzvahs, Asherak Ba'adela, it's only in Yiddishkeit, Hadrachim, these ways, Hu Achayim Amitim, is true life, Begashmis of Ruchnis. It's just an interesting little letter. This could have been any father to any daughter, but yeah, the Frierdike Rebbe saw something good in one of his daughters, he passed it along. Learn a midah teva from her. Okay, now goes page 7. Now, of course, you may be familiar with this, but it still floors me every time I read about it. We're going back. Okay, the letter we just read is from 1933. The letter we're reading currently is from 1929. On page 7 it says, this is from the Frierdike Rebbe to our Rebbe. His boinen heitev, contemplate well. B'hamargolas ha'tayva, the precious pearl, asher nasan l'cham olakim, that God gave you, la'erech yama v'shalom tevis, for a long and successful life. V'chol tov, with all good, b'gashmis u'beruchnis. V'Hashem yizbarach, and God Almighty, yitim l'cha chochma bina v'das, should give you wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. Lahavin ha'inyan, to understand this idea, aboriyah thoroughly, be'emes la'amin. The Frierdike Rebbe says to the Rebbe, God gave you a precious pearl. You need all the help of your chokhmah bin and das to truly understand how precious this pearl is. Now, page 8, a few months later, The Frierdike Rebbe writes to the Rebbe, this paragraph here goes the first full paragraph. Second paragraph at the top of page Ayin Dalet. Val dvara matana teva, and inasmuch as the good gift, Margolis Yikara, the precious pearl that I wrote to you about a few months ago, Adayin Einati Yedea Kavanasi, do you still not know what I meant? Or have you already figured out what I meant, what my riddle was? Hey, you Bruchim, be blessed. With all kinds of good. Is material and spiritual. We should meet each other with happy hearts. So the Rebbe responds. One line. You see? The smaller type is our Rebbe's responses. You see? One line. The quality and essence of this good pearl that you gave me, Terem Hivanti Pidish Mahu. I have no idea what you're talking about. Okay? Turn to page 9. Or actually top of page 10, pardon me. This letter was dated a couple of months later, after Pesach. The precious pearl which God Almighty gave you, Ki Biti. This is my daughter. Rayoscha kavuda tichya. Your honorable wife. Ve'elzeh kivanti b'mechtavi. And that's what I meant in my earlier letters. V'lediyakta b'shei, you didn't pay attention. Yekuyim ba. It should be realized in her. Chochmas noshin bon sabesa. The wisdom of women build their home. Al yesedi kedesh hakadoshim. On the foundations of the Holy of Holies. Your home should be open broadly to all good. That all of us were blessed together by our Rebbeim, whose words live forever. This is such an interest. Over the course of 6 months, 6 months or 7 months, the Frierdike Rebbe is goading the Rebbe. You know what I'm talking about yet? No idea. One of the things that emerges in this volume most clearly is the personality differences. The Frierdike Rebbe is so warm, so artistic, and the Rebbe is so black and white. It's just incredible. There are 1,001, and this is one of them. You know, the Rebbe says, I don't get it. Sorry, I know what you're talking about. I just want to read you one page, which I did not include in this stack, but I once, in a previous occasion, I shared it with people. I just find this very, very compelling.
How long has Rebbe married to this first husband?
The year of their wedding. Months after their wedding. And I want to tell you something. He's not just playing around. You know, he sounds like he's teasing them. The Rebbitzen was a secret. And the Frierdike Rebbe says, I'd like you to know what you have, you know. Oh yeah, I wish I could find it. Page Reish Mem Zayin, if you want to look it up again. It's a letter written to the Rebbe in 1937 from Perkesdorf. I'm going to read and translate. Rayoscha hakavuda, your honorable wife, Biteinu hayakara, our precious daughter, Tichya, Yosheves Mimuli, is sitting across from me as he's writing this letter. Umabetis, and she's looking at me. Be'eineha hagedolos hayafes v'hamechukames. With her large, beautiful, and wise eyes, umit papetes, and she's muttering, Tatalatayere, my precious father, oid ma'at v'giyazman sudas halayla, it's almost time to eat supper. Va'ata oid loitiyalta gamba kalendar, you haven't even taken a stroll in the hallway. The Frierdike Rebbe was ill. This is just incredible words. Yeah, Tatalatayere. Okay. That's what I wanted you to read. Okay. Now, back to our little collection. Page 10 at the bottom. This is wonderful. This is a birthday letter for the Frierdike Rebbe to his daughter in Tafresh Tzadik, 1930. The same page at the bottom, okay? Heint is dem lichtigen süßen Tag für uns allen today, on this illuminated sweet day for all of us. Dem Tag von deine Imeninjes. I guess that means your birth. Mit viel Glück with much success, ad mei esim shant 120 years. Ben shich dir liebe teire tochter mine, I bless you, my beloved, precious daughter. As Hashem Yisbarach, page 11. God Almighty soll dir geben lange, gute, freiliche, gesunde, glückliche Jahre. God should give you long, good, happy, healthy, successful years. Im Ishech, with your husband. Chasni Yekiri, my precious son-in-law, Harav Menachem Elashich. Hashem Yisbarach soll mamala sein, alle deine gute und kluge bakashis. God should fulfill all of your good and wise requests. Was du best by Hashem Yisbarach, that God Almighty, that you ask of God Almighty. Hashem soll euch geben a guten, edlen, glücklichen Leben. Hashem should give you a good, fine, fortunate life. Ihr sollt gebencht sein, gebencht. You should be blessed. Mit gute, gesunde, kluge, edle Kinder. With good, healthy, smart, fine children. Ihr sollt sein gebencht mit guter Parnassa. You should have good success in Parnassa. Sein beglückt in dem grundigen idischer Weg. You should be successful in the fundamental Jewish way. And then there's a whole bunch of wonderful accolades which I'm going to skip. Go to the bottom of the page. Tachte Tayere, my precious daughter. Alles in der Welt hat a Grenitz. Everything in this world has a limit. A gevul, a border, of a hefset, and an end. Elterin's ava pnimis is built in Magbelis. The inner love that parents have for children is infinite. Der Benkin is unbegrenzt. The longing, the missing you is infinite. Hashem is Baruch soll uns helfen. God Almighty should help us. Sehen sich Gesundheit. We should see each other healthily and feel nachas b'gashmis u'beruchnis. Now, by the way, the bottom of that page, the next page, page 12, is the page I was looking for about Hoshana Rabbah. Okay, turn to page 13. Now, the last two letters are very, very interesting. I'm sorry. They lived in New York together for 10 years. You saw her every day. 2 letters, okay? Very interesting letters. These letters say so much about the Rebbe and the Rebbitzen, so much about the Frierdike Rebbe, and they reveal, amongst other things, the very different personalities that the Rebbe and the Frierdike Rebbe had. I remember reading, a short while after Gimel Tammuz, a woman who's a graphologist, that means she's an expert at handwritings, did an expose on the Rebbe and the Rebbitzen, and wrote that they had the exact same personality. She studied their handwritings and concluded they had the very, very same personality. Now, whatever that personality was, it was very different than the Frierdike Rebbe's personality. Listen to this letter. Okay, I'm reading the arrowed paragraphs. Zayendik in Marienbahn, when I was in Marienbahn, which is in Austria, Sonntag, Sunday, far unser Abfahren before we left, I was visited by a man named Mr. Mark Seufer from Paris. He's from Parisian. Is gewend in Karlsbad. He was in Karlsbad. Is gekommen sein sich. He came to see me. Is gekommen sein. So I had a conversation with this man. Habe ich ihm erzählt. I told him, Mikayach, Chasni, Yekiri, V'chavivi, Harav, Ramam, Ishech, Anichbach, Yichye. So the Frierdike Rebbe said, how do I say this nicely? I boasted. The Rebbe was already living in Paris, and this man was Parisian. So he started to tell this person about the Rebbe. Is given in wilde his spoilers. Top of page 14 now. He was crazy excited. Will sich sehr bekonnen. He wants to meet you, wants to get to know you. Is sehr a hartziger Mensch. He's a very passionate person. Liebt sehr a tevetan. Likes to do a favor. Hat halt covet. He likes covet. Aber er ist ein ganz feiner Mensch. He is all in all a nice person. And then the Rebbe says, Ich will sehr wollen. I would really want. Men soll bekannt werden. You should get to know each other. Nor mit reden. Nicht mit schweigen. You speak Yiddish. But you have to speak. Stop being quiet. Der euch behalten sich von Menschen, the Rebbe writes to his son-in-law and daughter, the hiding from people brings to kein Sachnet, brings to nothing. Ich weiß nicht. I don't understand. Mir verschafft das viel like mas nefesh. It causes me pain that you two are hiding. Ader Rebbe, mit der Wellen sein Bakat, you want to let people get to know you. Und in gewisse Sachen, und in certain things, und bei gewisse Gelegenheiten, under certain conditions, lassen sich der können. Let people see who you are. Stop hiding. Mit a gewissen interessanten Schmurs, by engaging in an interesting conversation, and the Rebbe didn't mean a Gemara mit a Tosis. He meant a worldly conversation. For gewisse Erklärungen and explaining different things, as wohl sehr viel guten Nutzen gebracht. It would have a lot of favorable benefits. Now, what do you think the Rebbe and the Rebbitzen did after they got this letter? Absolutely nothing. Yeah. Okay. Now, page 16. Another incredible piece of history that was never known to me until this book was published, and I don't know how many people know about this. Die Tag, these last days, there's a man named Mr. Reinen who actually lived in Crown Heights. He passed away in 1958, Tafshin Yudches. When he died, the Rebbe made Poshet a hesped for him by Fabrengen. The Rebbe eulogized him by Fabrengen. And he said, also, in Isbetelach, the Rebbe said no one knew who this Mr. Reinen was. He was a very secretive man. He helped the Frierdike by Gwald. The Rebbe said that he had a stack of letters, which he received from the Frierdike Rebbe, which he would never let out of his hands. And the Rebbe says, I tried many times to open this man up to find out who he was. And the Rebbe says he was a secret from me. I couldn't get to know him. And one day he was on a train. He lost the packet of letters, and within weeks he passed away. And the Rebbe says he died. Nobody went to his levaya, and the Rebbe said it's a pushta'im from this was a person who helped the Frierdike Rebbe so much. He wasn't given the appropriate final honor, so the Rebbe Poshet was maspid and he eulogized him by a Fabrengen. This Mr. Reinen. Wegen der Rabbonos in Paris, Bechlal, about the rabbinate in Paris, und schreibt, and this Mr. Reinen was writing to the Frierdike Rebbe in 1935, Tomer Volt, perhaps it would be desirous of Harav Menachem Mendel Sheyichye Gewalt, that Harav Menachem Mendel Sheyichye, you know what that is, would want to be the Rav of Paris. My American Sheyichye had gefragt, Mr. American, I don't know who the man is, asked, Sie kennen über dem trachten, if there's anything to think about. And the Rebbe continues. In Paris hat sich gebildet a Komitee. In Paris, a new committee was formed. Was vereinigt, that's going to unify alle Minyanim, was geherenit zu der Konsistoire, that don't belong to the official community. In other words, they want to make a second Jewish community. Und my American Sheyichye is the Frierdike von Komitee, and Mr. Merkin is the executive director of this committee. The Komitee interessiert sich. This committee is interested sehr very much mit der Rabbonos Frage, the question of the rabbinate. Willen sehr wissen, and they want to know very much, zu kann man reden wegen der Rabbonos Kandidat, whether they can even discuss the candidacy for this position of Rav, Fardir, for you, Chafni Yekiri Harav Ramam Sheyichye. Einer Achave von Komitee, one of the members of this committee from the Pnei HaCharedim of Frankfurt, who's from the more religious Jews who came originally from Germany, a Gavisa Orthodox, don't ask them what that means, a certain Orthodox, turn the page please, page 17 now. Engineer Mal Paste Sheyichye, an engineer by the name of Mr. Paste, hat wieder gefragt, asked again, by Yedidenu Hanayla Marene Sheyichye, from our dear friend Mr. Reinen, und weiß nicht, was to answer, he doesn't know what to say. Amal hat bei euch liebe Kinder gefragt, to the Frierdike Rebbe, he once asked you directly, and guess what happened? Und wie gewöhnlich is geblieben unantwortet. And as always, you didn't say anything. You didn't say yes, you didn't say no, you smart. So, Kinderliebe, I'm skipping one paragraph. My precious children, listen to this. Ich hab gar kein Werte nicht. I don't have enough words. A reis zu sagen, to express, was war a simcha, what kind of joy, mir hat die Prodlogiene gemacht. This proposal gave me. Und wie glücklich ich wohl gewesen. And how fortunate I were to be, wenn ich wohl den Vorschlag angenommen. He says to the Rebbe, I would be very happy if you took the job. Now he's careful not to tell the Rebbe to take the job, because if the Rebbe would tell him, he would do it. He's asking him to take the job. And as we all know, he didn't take it. Wenn ihr wollt den Verschlag, und Hashem Yisborach wollt geholfen. Hashem should help. Und die Sache wollte sich beschaut Tevu Maslachas aufgeführt. And this matter would with great success work itself out. Pudden gesund. Pounds and pounds of health wollt mir zugekommen would be added to me if you took this position. As wollt mir erfreit mein zerbrochenen Hart. It would bring joy to my broken heart. Listen, this is the Frierdike Rebbe writing to the Rebbe and the Rebbitzen. Ich wende sich zu euch Kinderliebe. I turn to you, my beloved children. Mit a innerliche tiefe bakasha, with an inner and deep request. Zu beiden gleich, to both of you. Gut betrachten den Vorschlag, to think well about this proposal, und gut vertiefen sich and apply yourself. Ich bet sehr, I'm asking very much, bald can end for Kinderliebe, to respond quickly, my children, betracht sich ernst. Think about it seriously. Most interesting. Okay, there's more and more, but this is all we have time for.